Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave,
on behalf of every father and every mother,
wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors,
and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a fantastic broadcast for you today. It is absolutely loaded with stuff. So I'm going to be covering the news. We'll be followed up with a report from Germany to Ukraine about the updates there. And that will be followed by an interview between John Ridge and Fabian Hoffmann. And then that will be followed by a discussion about Bradley combat in Ukraine with a Bradley operator, Smokey. So it's an excellent broadcast. Please do like the stream and subscribe to Tochnyi for more content in the future. So without any further delay, I will get right into the news. This week, the IT Coalition Steering Group, led by Estonia and Luxembourg, convened in Tallinn to review the initial equipment deliveries to Ukraine and discuss upcoming contributions. Spain declared its forthcoming membership in the coalition, while Luxembourg, Iceland, Estonia, and Belgium pledged a total of 22 million euros in new contributions. Prior to the meeting, a technical session showcased the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense's new Innovation Center, with developers presenting the Delta Situational Awareness System to coalition partners. The President of Ukraine has ratified a bilateral security cooperation agreement with the Prime Minister of Portugal, as announced by the Portuguese Prime Minister Luís Montenegro during a joint press conference. Zelensky and the Portuguese Prime Minister signed the Ukraine-Portugal agreement spanning 10 years at the official residence of the latter in Lisbon. The agreement emphasizes Portugal's backing of Ukraine's reforms toward joining the European Union and NATO, particularly through bolstering economic and trade ties to facilitate Ukraine's integration into the internal market. With this agreement, Portugal becomes the 12th nation with which Ukraine has established a security cooperation framework indicative of enduring support. Zelensky has embarked on diplomatic visits to Spain and Belgium as well, where he concluded bilateral security pacts with the respective prime ministers, Pedro Sanchez and the Belgian counterpart. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre of Norway also formalized a bilateral security cooperation and long-term support agreement, as reported by Militarny. The signing ceremony took place on May 31st in Stockholm, with the text of the agreement made available on the Ukrainian president's website. According to the agreement, Norway will extend approximately 1.2 billion euros in military assistance to Ukraine in 2024. Over the span to 2027, they've earmarked 6.4 billion under the long-term Nansen program to bolster Ukraine's capabilities, with the commitment to sustain support throughout the agreement's duration. In collaboration with allies, Norway will assist Ukraine in enhancing its modern combat aircraft capabilities, including the donation of F-16 fighter jets. Additionally, Norway will play an important role in advancing Ukrainian maritime capacities in the Black and Azov Seas, as well as providing NASAMS air defense systems, equipment, and training. With this agreement, Norway becomes the fifth. So I should just mention, Ukraine signed a ton of agreements this week. So, all the reports kind of are adding numbers of total agreements. I believe 15 total, or maybe 16 total agreements have been reached so far, including, of course, the ones with the UK, France, Germany that have already been signed previously. Norway also additionally pledged another $600 million in support as of 2024 so far in April. Ukraine and Iceland have also entered into a security cooperation and long-term support agreement, as announced by the official website of their president. Over the years 2024 to 2028, 4 billion Icelandic kroner, I believe, ISK, 4 billion, which is equivalent to 30 million USD, will ensure their continuous support throughout the duration. Iceland is prepared to finance, procure, and deliver defense-related resources and equipment, alongside with collaborating with Ukraine to foster the growth of the defense industry. An integral part of their assistance is transporting military supplies and equipment via cargo plane. Additionally, Iceland will prioritize supporting and equipping women serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. Distinct sections of the agreement address backing the Ukrainian peace formula. This is included in most of the new agreements. Is they've endorsed the Ukrainian peace formula, which is going to be discussed or elaborated on in the upcoming peace conference in Switzerland. They also agreed to impose additional sanctions on Russia, facilitate compensation for damages, and pursue accountability for the aggressor. Furthermore, the agreement underscores the enhancement of social and civilian infrastructure encompassing education and energy security. They've also undertaken to increase their diplomatic presence in Kyiv, although they didn't really specify, except that they said they're going to try to engage more with different sectors of the Ukrainian government. During President Zelensky's visit to Stockholm, Ukraine finalized a security agreement with Sweden, as reported again by the president's office. The Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson represented Sweden signing the agreement, and it entails additional financial and military assistance to Ukraine through the year 2026. Initially, Sweden will provide 6.5 billion euros, which averages out to 2.2 billion annually, with provisions for increasing aid over the 10-year duration of the agreement. They prioritize support for aviation, air defense, armored vehicles, artillery, maritime security, mine clearance, and UAVs. Ukraine will gain access to the specialized ASC 890 airborne early warning and control aircraft under this agreement, with the possibility of receiving Gripen fighter jets from Sweden and training Ukrainian pilots for these aircraft. Sweden has pledged to improve Ukraine's defense industry and collaborate on the development of new weaponry, particularly through bilateral cooperation on the localization, repair, and maintenance of the production of Swedish defense products within Ukraine. Furthermore, Sweden has reaffirmed unequivocal support for their aspirations into EU and NATO membership. And they've also mentioned, there were previous reports that I'll just kind of include here, that Sweden will donate an additional ASC 890 airborne early warning and control aircraft. That was kind of all the result of this visit. In addition, the Swedish government has offered a new aid package, which, as far as I understand, is not covered directly by this new agreement. I already mentioned the aircraft that they're going to be donating. They've also agreed to contribute their entire inventory of armored tracked personnel carriers, which is the PBV 302, to bolster the establishment of new Ukrainian brigades. Additionally, Sweden will supply artillery ammunition and resources for the maintenance of previously provided equipment, along with surplus tank vehicles from the armed forces. I assume what they mean by tank vehicles would be like things to tow tanks, but maybe they mean tanks. Jansson emphasized Sweden's commitment to support Ukraine's procurement efforts through financial backing to coalition. They have this capability coalition, that's what it's called, and there's temporary initiatives as well. So they're going to continue financially backing those initiatives. And they'll also facilitate maintenance for previously donated Swedish equipment. Moreover, the Swedish Defense Research Agency has agreed to assist Ukraine in establishing their own defense research institute. In addition to enhancing Ukraine's command and control capabilities through satellite communication terminals, Jansson has affirmed Sweden's annual commitment of 2.3 billion, which I mentioned in the previous treaty. Next topic. According to a report by the New York Times, the Pentagon aims to ramp up artillery shell production to meet the goal of supplying Ukraine with up to 100,000 shells per month by the end of 2025. Currently, the factories in Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, collectively produce around 36,000 shells monthly. A new facility in Texas is now capable of supplying an additional 30,000 units per month. The construction of the Texas facility, which cost over $500 million, encompasses 3 production lines and is expected to create 350 new jobs. Engineered for versatile manufacturing of various ammunition types with minimal adjustment, the facility aligns with the military's modernization objectives. Furthermore, an ammunition plant is currently under construction in Camden, Arkansas, and the Pentagon also plans to initiate a second shell production line at a military plant in Iowa. In other words, like add another line to an existing plant, and partially reopen a facility in Parsons, Kansas. So the shells are coming. And the final topic this week, Milrem Robotics, a supplier of ground-based drones to Ukraine, has inaugurated a new facility in Tallinn. The company anticipates that the new plant will quintuple their production capacity, according to a press release. Noting positive feedback from end users on the performance of their robotic vehicles during testing, Milrem Robotics is gearing up for large-scale procurements to increase their production, indicating a readiness to engage in future contracts. The press release highlights the increasing utilization of unmanned ground vehicles in Ukraine and emphasizes the significance of these new systems. With the new facility, they aim to manufacture 500 units annually of the operationally proven Themis unmanned ground vehicle, which is deployed in robotics programs across 18 countries currently, including 8 NATO member states. The Themis unmanned ground vehicle are actively supporting Ukrainian soldiers currently in the war against Russia, or the Russian invasion. Last year, the Edge Group, PSC, which is based in the United Arab Emirates, acquired a majority stake in the company. As a part of its expansion, they signed an agreement with the Ukrainian defense industry, which is called Ukroboronaprom, to collaborate on the next generation of multi-domain robotic defense systems. The partnership will involve Ukrainian defense firms in integrating their technologies, such as weapon systems, electronic warfare, and mine-clearing equipment, along with Milrem's robotic vehicles, which are customizable to meet the armed forces' needs. So that concludes my report for this week. I will now turn it over to Mr. German Aid to Ukraine for his report. Over to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. As always, I will now present the most important news from Germany regarding aid to Ukraine. On Monday, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock announced in Brussels that Germany will provide Ukraine with a further 60 million euros in humanitarian aid, which will particularly will benefit the eastern regions of Ukraine. On Thursday, the German Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius has pledged a new military aid package worth 500 million euros to Ukraine. The package contains a large number of IRIS-TSL missiles and a small number of IRIS-T missiles. Also included are reconnaissance drones for, quote, the battle in the Black Sea, as well as various spare parts such as spare barrels for the Ukrainian Panzerhaubitze 2000, and engines for the Ukrainian Leopard 2 main battle tanks. As part of the package, Germany will also pay 19 million euros for the refurbishment, maintenance, and repair of the 19 Spanish Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks, which were announced recently, and also contract another 100 precision rifles, which are most likely HLR 338 long-range precision rifles, of which Germany has already delivered 145 to Ukraine and plans to deliver another at least 200 additional ones in the next days. On Friday, the German government has officially authorized Ukraine to strike on Russian territory bordering the Kharkiv region with all German delivered weapons and military equipment. I could say a lot more about it, but we will have a nice discussion about it later during the stream, so I just wanted to mention it very briefly. And as a last item of this week, also on Friday, the Berlin public transport company BVG announced that they will donate 12 Tatra vehicles, which are trams, to strengthen the transport network in Lviv. Before 2022, Lviv already bought several Tatra vehicles from the BVG, and prior to the now announced donation, the BVG already donated gearboxes and spare parts for exactly these very Tatras. And that's all I had for this week. I turn it over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Maurice. So now we will go ahead and begin our discussion. As Maurice mentioned, we will be discussing a little bit about the new targeting policies and their effects on the battlefield on the ground. So we'll have contributor John Ridge discuss with Fabian Hoffmann. So John, over to you.
So what I was thinking is that we were going to start out with Ukrainian strikes on Russian early warning radar sites, and then we'll move to a discussion of specific focus on Germany on their revision of the targeting restrictions on Ukraine with regard to Russia. So to start it off, Fabian, as sort of a general overview, and Erlend, if you could pull up that one overall radar coverage map, as someone in strategic studies, what's your, in sort of the abstract here, we have a non-nuclear armed state attacking the early warning infrastructure of a nuclear armed state. What are your sort of first impressions in the abstract of this situation?
Sure. So what you can see here is the strategic early warning network of the Russian Federation, at least the ground-based one. This is also supported by a space-based satellite network. As far as I know, it's 4 operational geostationary satellites that can also assist in terms of picking up signatures of ICBM launches from the United States and potential other nuclear weapon states. But this ground-based strategic early warning network that is really intended to pick up the signatures of incoming ICBM warheads as they are on their terminal approach onto the country. And so the basic idea behind that, of course, is that if you are attacked, you know it's coming and you can react. And that's especially important for a country like the Russian Federation, which has a launch under warning posture, meaning that officially, according to its posture, its doctrine, it's not intending to ride out an enemy first strike, but it is intending to react to the incoming first strike as it is happening and launching a retaliatory strike. And so the issue then is, right, if you destroy this early warning network, you might blind, or you will blind the adversary, the nuclear weapon state, hindering that nuclear weapon state from taking appropriate action in time. And given, right, that since at least the second half of the Cold War, we've basically accepted with the Russian Federation, in terms of policy, mutually assured destruction and the objective of strategic stability. We're not necessarily planning on, or at least, I mean, it's a bit ambiguous, but at least officially, once in a while, we reaffirm that a nuclear war cannot be won and should therefore not be fought. And if that's the case, we want to be in a very stable environment, if possible, with our nuclear adversaries. And if I now go after my adversary's ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, including strategic early warning, that might be highly destabilizing. So if you take that into account, that can explain why from some states, especially the United States, also Germany, the reactions were quite intense, and why they reacted in a very hostile manner to this new targeting policy from Ukraine.
Thank you. So to kind of move a little bit deeper into the specifics here, Erlend, if you could pull up the map for Armavir. Yes, that one. Thank you. So obviously, a little bit earlier, well, technically last month now, in early May, Ukraine obviously executed this raid and damaged both of the emitters at the Armavir site, the 2 Voronezh DM early warning radars. What sort of, and obviously we've talked about this privately, and we have some differing impressions here, but what's sort of your overview as to what the Ukrainian rationale here is for targeting these sites?
Sure. So I'm pretty sure at this point it had a dual purpose. I think one was directly related to theater operations in Ukraine. So what you see here, right, is that the radar coverage is partially covering the south of Ukraine, including Crimea. It's a bit difficult to tell, where exactly to which area the radar coverage extends. I've seen some analysis suggesting, right, that it covers a bit more in Ukraine, also further north. But I think that's without proper analysis and maybe even classified information, that's really difficult to fully uncover where the radar coverage ends. But I think there's a good case to be made that this strategic early warning radar, which primarily plays a role in looking out for incoming ICBM warheads, can also play a role for theater operations in Ukraine, in particular picking up launches of ATACMS maneuvering ballistic missiles. Given that their APG is, as far as I know, somewhere between 65 and 75 kilometers on a normal trajectory, that should certainly be outside the radar shadow created by that early warning radar and inside the coverage. So signatures of that should be picked up. There's a bit of an argument, or people are arguing, to what extent this radar is integrated into the overall early warning network, also for tactical operational forces in Ukraine, so not just the Russian strategic forces. And I think whether or not it's fully integrated, I mean, it definitely can probably play a role to some extent, at least in early warning. I mean, worst case, it's just an operator manually basically telling S400, S300 units to turn on their radars because bearing XYZ, there's an incoming threat. So I think in that sense, there's a good case to be made that probably this radar played a role in theater operations, and so there is value in taking it out just from a military perspective. Although again, right, the full value I do not fully understand, because that's just we're lacking a bit the information here, at least I. So that's one factor, military factor, and I think there's also a second one, and that's a very political factor. I think engaging these types of targets for Ukraine is part of a broader asymmetric counter-escalation strategy. So as Russia escalates that conflict horizontally and vertically all over again, so it's broadening the scope and the intensity of the war, it's quite difficult to keep up for Ukraine in a symmetric fashion, and to find appropriate answers, both because it doesn't have the means, it does not have the same missile manufacturing capabilities, the same arsenal depth, and of course it's also hampered by targeting restrictions imposed by Western states when it comes to using their weapon systems. And so what Ukraine needs to do is they want to find a way to respond to Russian escalation in an asymmetric manner, in which they can still inflict significant cost on Russia, while also with being within their means. And these strategic early warning radars, they are very important pieces of infrastructure for a nuclear weapon state like Russia. They are rather hard to replace in today's environment, but at the same time, they're also soft targets, right? They're not armored, they're not hardened, they're not buried. They're rather fragile pieces of technology standing in the open. And as far as we know, or what we've seen repeatedly, Russia has had difficulties protecting its infrastructure. So it was also basically an open target. And what Ukraine said, look, this is a great target to engage in order to send a message to Russia that so Ukraine still has options to inflict pain where it hurts, while at the same time, this of course also sends a message to the United States and to other Western partners that independent of their targeting restrictions, independent of their weapon deliveries, Ukraine is capable of pursuing certain targeting strategies fully autonomously, whether or not Western partners like that. So I think it was overall this dual purpose of achieving military effects while also sending political signals both to Russia and to Western partners.
Thank you, Erlend. If you could go to the map for Orsk, just to, I guess maybe to rehash in some form the little bit of the discussion we had privately the other week. My sort of read of it is particularly taking into account the attempted raid, as it doesn't appear it was successful, on the southern-facing Voronezh imset in outside Orsk in Orenburg Oblast, so just north of Kazakhstan. I've come to strongly suspect that political component really outweighs the military component in the Ukrainian calculus, because that that Voronezh imset has no bearing on operations in Ukraine. And I think specifically what they're attempting to do is, and I know you have a slightly different view of it, which I'd love to hear as a counter to mine, that the Ukrainians are deliberately being coercive towards their Western allies, the United States in particular, in engaging target sets that the U.S. administration does not want them to. We saw this with the raids, which are obviously still continuing on the Russian hydrocarbon industry, which sparked a lot of ire, both publicly and privately. I think publicly anyway, certainly more than the early warning radar strikes in any case, about those targeting practices and sort of our domestic political concerns there. But I think that an analogy can be drawn there, in that I strongly suspect the Ukrainians are trying to send a very specific signal to the White House, saying that we need the capacity to be able to strike relevant military targets in Russia to defend ourselves prior to, just the past 48, 72 hours. That was not the case, of course. And, what they're trying to say is if you want to have a say in how we prosecute targets in Russia and what targets we prosecute, then we need to be using your weapons to do that, if you want to be able to have realistic leverage there.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. This is definitely part of coercive messaging of Ukraine towards the United States, making clear to US decision makers that by not delivering the weapon systems and the numbers that we would like to see, and then especially imposing targeting restrictions outside of Ukrainian territory, signaling to US decision makers that they have themselves kind of locked out of the targeting cycle. So they no longer have a say which kinds of targets are now engaged on Russian territory. And I think, right, this is the message that they're trying to send. And if you want to regain some control over the types of infrastructure targets we're looking at, then you better deliver the weapon systems that we need and also lift some of your targeting restrictions. So I fully understand the rationale behind the strategy. As I've pointed out, my concern is that the propensity to panic in DC is greater than the propensity to learn. So in that sense, I'm not sure how successful this strategy will be in the end, and I'm quite concerned that it will in the end actually backfire.
Yeah, the sort of the counter argument that I make there is, the continuing line primarily from the United States has been that if Ukraine does not toe the line that we want them to, we will terminate security assistance. That has mainly been the threat behind, or how we've been enforcing the previous targeting restrictions against using Western and other Allied provided weapons inside Russia proper. The way I've kind of been thinking about it is, on the one hand, the White House could simply, just not respond to Ukrainian messaging here and just uphold the status quo, and Ukraine can continue to pursue these raids in that case. Or, well, I should back up a little and say, I'm not sure their main area of leverage here, again, which is terminating security assistance. I'm not sure how credible that is a threat that they can make in this case if it's Ukraine targeting Russian early warning infrastructure with Ukrainian assets, because, they can obviously ignore the message and not change anything. But if they actively want it to stop, that's really their only leverage aside from, acceding to Ukrainian demands.
Yeah, I honestly think a lot will depend on whether this remains rather isolated strikes. Then it's pretty clear that it was mostly done for these types of signaling effects, coercive effects, or if this becomes part of a broader campaign effort. So, for example, if we see repeated attempts at the early warning radar in Orenburg region here on the map, then I think that's when we get into territory where probably a stronger, or what we at least would get into territory where a stronger reaction on the US side might be warranted from their perspective. I think right now, if it just stays with these two instances, with this one destroyed radar, and with an attempt at the other one, I don't think it will change a lot. I mean, in the end, we don't know exactly, right, how this is perceived in the White House. I will just say that, coming from an academic perspective, the concept of strategic stability and then the concept of crisis stability, right, which is not giving your adversary an incentive to strike first in a crisis, that is deeply, deeply ingrained within US political discourse. And there is a body of literature that dates back 6.5 decades. And, the Joint Chief of Staff, they have a directorate for strategic stability. So it's not even just an academic concept. It's deeply integrated within policy. And so, coming from that perspective, I can see, or at least I clearly perceive a case how there are a lot of people right now inside the administration that are putting heavy pressure on Ukraine to cease these types of strikes. Right? Whether or not I believe this is right or wrong. First of all, I think that's fully up to the Ukrainians what they want to strike and what not. But I'm pretty sure right now they're receiving a lot of pushback for what they've done, and so I'm not sure if we will see more of that in the future.
One final thing, I guess, before we shift over to the targeting restrictions themselves with regard to Germany. Erlend, if you could pull up that overall map again.
The first one.
Yes. Thank you. The one other thing, Fabian, that I was sort of thinking about the other day is, do you think that there is in regard to the specific early warning radars that Ukraine could conceivably target, obviously Armavir was sort of a matter of convenience in terms of its location, Orsk as well. But there are, the early warning radar, for example, in St. Petersburg, that's pretty similar distance from Orsk, for example. Do you think that there would be a different reaction, for example, if Ukraine began to target the early warning radars directly facing, say, North America and the continental United States?
Yeah, I think so. So first of all, I think it would be different because, as I just said, then it would be clear it's not just isolated attempts at striking this type of infrastructure, but it's part of a broader counter ISR campaign effort, counter strategic ISR campaign effort, however you want to call it. And then especially if you strike adjacent strategic early warning radars, then you would build an attack corridor, right? And I think that would be seen as highly destabilizing. I mean, again, in general, from a strategic stability perspective, if this is what truly motivates you, ISR is basically the second worst type of target that you can engage. Second only to direct nuclear capabilities of your adversary. So if it turns out that let's say these early warning radars that should be absolutely in range of Ukraine right now and that are facing more towards the direction of the United States, North America, or also Greenland and Arctic, I think pressure would be mounting on Ukraine to seize these types of attacks. However, difficult to say how exactly this would materialize. But again, I'm rather concerned that the reaction would be quite allergic and hence quite drastic.
Thank you. And then, so I guess to pivot to the targeting restrictions or the revision in policy from Germany, I find this particularly interesting, and I'm so happy that not just you, but obviously German Aid to Ukraine is here as well to discuss this. We saw for the longest time the strong opposition from Scholz and the German government to Ukrainian strikes in Russia generally, but obviously with Western provided weapons in particular, that was obviously very strong. And of course, that over the past 72, 96 hours, that's fallen away like sand as the U.S. revised its policy. I think many others had the impression that Germany was sort of leading the U.S., not necessarily in terms of determining policy, but in terms of the strength of their opposition to Ukraine conducting strikes in Russia with donated weapons. But again, the past week has seemingly revealed that it's the opposite, that Germany is just completely mirroring U.S. policy in this regard. And I'm very curious what your sort of take on this is.
Yeah, it is all about the United States in that regard, I would say. It's absolutely mirroring US policy, and Germany was fully waiting for the United States. The United States, when it comes to lifting these types of targeting restrictions, is by far the most important actor. That is because the United States is, realistically speaking, within NATO, the only country that can fully respond to any drastic escalation on the Russian side, which I think is unlikely, and I would say the Ukrainians probably also believe it's rather unlikely to see drastic escalatory coercive steps in response to widening the targeting radius on Russian territory. But of course, it's not zero. And if that's the case, you need to have someone to back you up when you take these steps, especially as you potentially strike politically sensitive targets. And this backup, really, there's only one country who can fully provide that, and that's the United States, especially when it comes to, how would we react if Russia would start signaling a greater willingness to go to the nuclear level. I mean, in that regard, both due to their nuclear force posture and their conventional capabilities, European states would be rather hard-pressed to find appropriate answers to that. And that's why you have to have the United States on board. And I think that's why it's so incredibly important for Germany to go after the United States has taken that step. And that's, for example, also the case why Ukraine, even though I'm pretty sure the French by now have, probably allowed them to strike pretty much whatever target they want inside or outside Russia with their scalps, why they're still not engaging certain types of targets, because the Americans have made clear that they would not accept that. And that tells the Ukrainians that, look, if something bad could happen in response, if drastic escalatory measures could be taken, we may not have the full backing of the United States. And that's just something that Ukraine wants to avoid. So yeah, when it comes to lifting targeting restrictions, I think all eyes are on the United States. And by far, that is the most important actor in that regard.
Right. And I guess the aspect of it that gives me pause, the thing that I understand at least, is, I guess, the apparent lack of public pressure from the German government on the U.S. government to revise these policies. If presumably Scholz was willing to endorse these policy revisions the entire time, obviously that sort of bled out into the public with the Leopard 2 and Abrams debacle towards the end of 2022. But the German government, up until the very, very last moment, didn't look like there was any, public pressure that they supported a policy change. And then all of a sudden, it just changes overnight. That's the one thing that I'm sort of struggling to get a handle on.
Yeah, so I think my assumption is that it's just pretty clear that Germany is incredibly risk averse, and Germany probably, at least the decision-making centers inside the chancellery, so Scholz and his entourage, they probably perceive the risk of this war escalating to a broader confrontation between NATO and Russia as a greater risk than Ukraine losing this war. And if that's the case, right, your number one priority, your number one objective is to keep escalatory pressures low and to not take any risks. And, as I've just said, I think widening or lifting the targeting restrictions, the risks that come with that, at least initially, they're really minuscule, but they're not zero. And so what you need are decision makers, like I think Macron has kind of understood that, right, I have to weigh risks. I cannot fully avoid risk taking. Both helping Ukraine has risks as much as not helping Ukraine has risks. And I think Macron and British decision makers, for example, they have made the assessment that the risks of a Ukrainian defeat for the European continent would be greater than the risks of helping Ukraine right now. And I think in the Chancellery in Berlin, that risk assessment still looks very different. They still believe probably that the larger risks relate to escalatory pressures rather than Ukrainian defeat. And I think that can then explain why Scholz was probably quite happy with the United States' position on not lifting those targeting restrictions, because they probably, or I'm pretty sure that they foresee quite substantial risks, right? I think their risk assessment is quite different when it comes to this policy change. And I think they've changed it then rather reluctantly, simply because after the United States has made that policy change, it was pretty much unfeasible or not feasible for for Germany to continue down that path in isolation, because that's also something that German decision makers really want to avoid, I think.
Right. So in other words, it's not necessarily so much that Germany supported, or Scholz specifically supported, a policy revision, just didn't voice that publicly. It's more so they were opposed to it. The U.S. administration made a decision to revise our approach, and Scholz had all said, in for a penny, in for a pound. If the U.S. is committing to this, we may as well.
Yes, that would be pretty much my assessment. Yes. I'm like to add to that, I'm pretty sure that if the US had not made that policy change, I'm pretty sure that German policy would also not have changed until today.
Yeah, and that's sort of been my assumption as well. Germany, Ukraine, is there anything else you wanted to sort of add to that?
No, I mostly agree with what Fabian said. I just want to add that I do agree when Fabian says when the US policy wouldn't change, German policy wouldn't have changed. But I want to add that, at least to my perspective, I'm following basically all of the press conferences Scholz is attending and statements and whatever, right? And from what my understanding was, at least it felt to me that way. He spoke days prior, not a lot of days prior, because there was a statement like 3 or 4 days before Germany authorized the limited strikes, where he said, basically said it's not going to happen, but kind of avoided the question. But 1 and 2 days before the US, or we got the reports here in Germany, I believe very late in the evening, that the US is allowing limited strikes. There was already some, at least it felt like to me, some kind of I mean, it would be good to do that, and it would be the right way, and Ukraine has all the right under international law, blah blah blah. But kind of avoiding really answering the question, like really answering it. And to me, it really felt like the Leopard 2 drama back then you talked about, or you mentioned earlier, because back then it was the same basically with the Leopard 2s. It was very first, no, it's not going to we're not going to do it, it's a red line, no tanks from Germany for Ukraine. And then it was kind of a little bit of change in communication, at least, and it wasn't so sure that Germany isn't doing it, also because of public pressure from other countries. And as soon as it was clear that the US is going to deliver Abrams, Germany was also on board and announced that it would be delivering Leopard tanks. And it felt like the same, that maybe the decision, or they already knew, all of them, that it would be the right thing to do and it needs to happen at some point. But as Fabian mentioned, like without the US actually allowing it to, we wouldn't have never done it. That's just my understanding from the situation.
Yeah,
you know what I tried to say with that.
Yes, I'm tracking.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think, for me, it becomes really apparent now where the chancellor's perceived, fundamental red lines are, that, what are the things he really does not want to risk. And that is highly or politically or even militarily sensitive targets inside Russia being taken out by German weapons, especially if Germany is the only country that delivers weapon systems that can reach certain targets. And I think that pretty much explains, right, why Taurus, after months of debate, is still off the table, because that's a long-range strike weapon, or even a deep strike weapon, if you want to call it like that. That very powerful warhead that can engage pretty much any type of highly sensitive target. And that's a nightmare scenario for Scholz. And that's even with ATACMS, right? Like given the more restricted range, this weapon system, even if it was fully allowed to attack, whatever target you want inside Ukraine, you would still have, some targets, especially more towards the decision-making centers in Moscow, that you could never reach with an ATACMS. So there would still be a great difference. And now I think why lifting those targeting restrictions for other types of German weapons was not such a red line as Taurus was is simply because, given their range, given their capabilities, you have no possibility of engaging the types of sensitive targets that Scholz really, really wants to avoid being targeted with German weapons. So this absolute worst case scenario cannot materialize with this shift in policy, whereas in Scholz's mind, it could have very much materialized if Taurus was delivered. So I think that can explain quite well, at least in my mind, why a shift in policy was possible on this topic, in addition, right, to the United States following suit, while on Taurus, it was simply no inch more that allowed for scope for policy changes.
Yeah.
Right, and I think to germinate to Ukraine, we spoke about this the other day, is if we sort of play this logic forward that we've seen with obviously Leopard and Abrams, and now the revision and the targeting restrictions. If Taurus is to happen, I've come around to the conclusion that the only way it will happen is if the U.S. does, one of two specific things. Well, at a minimum, we would have to give them an equivalent weapon system and essentially make that risk assessment on Germany's behalf and indicate that we are either willing to take the risk of giving them JASSM-ER and trusting them not to use it in Russia, or taking the risk of giving them JASSM-ER and telling them to go nuts with it, and to essentially make that risk calculus and make that decision for Germany and for the rest of Europe by extension, and hope, in for a penny, in for a pound. The decision's already been made. We may as well just throw our lot in with it at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good case to be made. I would say probably, at least with the current German administration of Scholz and his government, or probably not his government, just Scholz and his party, a U.S. change in policy would probably be more seen as a baseline, and it would still be a question whether Germany would want to follow suit. So I don't think it would necessarily be an automaticity at this point. So even if United States, delivered JASSM-ER, and even if they said, told the Ukrainians go nuts with it, even though I think, that would never happen. I'm pretty sure that if the United States were to deliver JASSM-ER, the only way that could occur is if it was highly restricted in terms of use, at least in terms of the types of targets, right? Even if we say, okay, that the range restrictions are fully lifted, the United States would probably still want to make sure that only military related infrastructure and targets are engaged. And I think if that were to occur, I think that would be seen in Berlin right now, at least as a baseline, but I'm pretty sure there would still be debate if you'd want to follow suit as Germany. And I really think that will or can only change fundamentally at this point if the government in Berlin changes. And given that we have elections upcoming in fall next year, and then with a new government coming in probably somewhere around spring 26, it's going to be interesting, right? Especially if you have a CDU-led government, a CDU chancellor who pretty much has indicated, all of the CDU has made clear, right, that they believe that delivering Taurus would be the right thing to do and should have happened a long time ago. So they're almost locked in, I feel like, at this point, to then follow suit on that promise, if it gets so far. But I think at least with Taurus, so to sum up my rant here, I think at this point with Taurus, it's so politically sensitive from a Berlin perspective that even if there was a change in policy to occur in the United States, I'm not sure that would lift the ban imposed by the German government on these types of weapon systems. So I think even then, Scholz might still be, no, this is too risky, and I'm not going to do it.
I mean, they, although I completely agree with you, but they have time, right? I mean, integration, like fully integration into the Ukrainian platforms. So the Ukrainian fighter jets need some time, right? So it could be a debate of like 1 or 2 months, maybe 3 months, and they still would have time until they would officially deliver them to Ukraine, because they need to be integrated anyways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think 1 or 2 months would be very optimistic. I'd probably longer. I would say like 3 to 6 months at the earliest after the government change. But yeah, that is also just speculation. That fully remains to be seen. Once we get there, and I think that's quite far out.
Well, in any case, I think that's a wrap for today. Thank you, Fabian, for joining us. We've loved having you. I hope you enjoyed your time here, and hope you feel like coming back in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Great discussion, and anytime.
John, I have one comment, because we got a few questions in the comment sections. Do you have time, Fabian, to maybe?
Yeah, sure, of course. I have all the time in the world.
Okay. Okay. The first one I saw was from Chris, I believe. Let me just bring it up. Yeah. So, yeah, has there been much coverage of this strike in Russian media? I'm surprised they haven't made a huge fuss about it. And I think he's referring to all the radar strikes.
So my loose understanding is Russian Telegram was screeching about it quite a bit, saying that it happened in April, but satellite imagery conclusively shows it occurred in early May. But I haven't seen Russian state media talking about it very much. But Russian Telegram was, of course, just beside themselves as always.
Yeah, and I think really, again, right, the options for Russia to respond to this type of attack are really limited. Most likely, if Russia wants to react to perceived escalation from the Ukrainian side, typically what they've done in the over the last couple of months and years is that they have expanded strikes on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and direct civilian targets, because there's really not that much that Russia can do in terms of expanding intensity and scope of the conflict right now in reaction to these coercive types of escalatory threats from Ukraine. And given this lack of options to respond, I think it's very much in the interest of the Russian state to keep that rather low. And yeah, I've also not seen anything, and I'm also pretty sure that's going to stay that way, exactly because of what I just said.
Yeah, the other thing is at a more, I guess, practical level, I assume, specifically with regard to nuclear signaling towards the US, France, and the UK, and also China and India by extension, given some of the coverage maps here. I don't think they want to let on anything about the state of their early warning capability. I think they just want everybody to assume that things are better than they maybe actually are.
Yeah, that could very well be. And also, one more thing to add. Pretty sure the Russian reaction was probably backdoor channels to the United States telling them how mean that was and how awful and how destabilizing. So I'm pretty sure that was the brunt of the reaction from the Russians was targeted at the Americans, though not in public.
Oh, how terrible it is that a radar gets destroyed, but tens of thousands of civilians in Mariupol doesn't matter, right? Does it? Yeah.
So there was actually one question, Erlend, that I wanted to briefly address. I'm not sure who asked it. Somebody asked about Russian early warning satellites, the EKS constellation, also known as Tundra or Kupol. It exists, as Fabian said. There's 4 satellites in They aren't in geostationary orbit. They are in, I think that they have their own orbit, Tundra orbits, which is a polar orbit because they're trying to maintain loiter time over northern continental United States, specifically over the Minuteman III fields. It works. It's not a great constellation, as best I can tell. It's relative to systems like SBIRS, which is the U.S. infrared early warning constellation that's in geostationary orbit. EKS is like hopelessly out of date. They literally reuse the imagers from their 1980s US KMO early warning constellation the Soviets developed. So it's not very good, but it should provide enough early warning for a launch under attack scenario, or launch under warning scenario, excuse me, though I'm sure the Russians would be uncomfortable with their confidence levels not having the ground-based early warning component.
Okay, I couldn't find the question referring to the satellites, but yeah.
There is also the other aspect of it is, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but when the constellation was initially being deployed, it did not have coverage of some of the notional Trident patrol areas. So again, they plan to build out a geostationary component that will be able to provide complete global coverage in combination with the polar component over the northern United States. But if that hasn't been completed, then there is some possibility that it might not be able to detect Trident launches, say, in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah. I also, to add to that, I think one of the reasons why the reaction on the US side was probably rather strong towards Ukraine is that probably the United States is not that confident in these satellite constellation. And thanks, John, for correcting me that they're not geostationary. I wasn't aware of that, but that makes sense. Right, but in the past we had it during the Cold War a couple of times that these satellites they picked up reflections from clouds as launches from ICBMs, and basically what operators have then done in the past, they've waited until those warheads, if they had indeed been launched, would have been in range of those strategic early warning radars, right? To provide this second set of confirmation that either an attack is underway, or to provide then confirmation that it was a false positive. And I think that's one reason why the United States is rather unhappy with this type of targeting, because they're not themselves too confident in Russian strategic early warning satellites, and they'd rather have Russia a set of capabilities to confirm that an attack is underway or not.
So, Erlend, if you want to pull it up, I just sent you an image on Discord of the EKS constellation. That should be helpful. So I just checked the launch schedule. All six of they're in Molniya orbit specifically. All six of the polar component of EKS has been deployed and is operational, but none of the geostationary component has been launched. So there's probably a decent probability that they don't have as consistent and as high confidence coverage over some of the notional Trident patrol areas at lower latitudes, and also obviously the Indian silo fields and the Chinese silo fields as well.
No, yeah, it makes perfect sense. So again, that is one of the reasons, right? Why we would then be concerned if we're concerned about strategic stability on the US side.
Okay, thank you. So next question is from Thierry to John or Fabian. Could those strikes on early warning not have utility for former Ukrainian strategic ballistic strikes with new missiles currently in development?
Yes and no. I mean, in theory, absolutely. I think John can talk a lot better about the Ukrainian ballistic missile program, short-range ballistic missile program. I mean, there's some work done there, so I'll let John speak on that. But I think, from a military perspective, I mean, if you want to have effect right now, you can have that effect because Ukraine is already launching ATACMS, short-range ballistic missiles, at targets in the south of Ukraine. So in that sense, I don't have to wait for an operational Ukrainian indigenous ballistic missile capability to have an effect when it comes to taking out that type of target.
Right. So to what Fabian was saying, the logic that's true of ATACMS with some of the specific radar sites providing potentially some early warning for Ukrainian tactical and short-range ballistic missiles, that would be just as true for, say, Sapson, if and when the Ukrainians are able to bring it into service in Erlend. If you could pull up the other image I just sent you to sort of illustrate my point, there are two additional considerations here. Obviously, the stated range bracket is something like Sapson's greater than ATACMS. So depending on what they're targeting, particularly I think if they're targeting something in Russia, there might be more relative benefit to the Russians from having these operational early warning capabilities, because greater range, greater time of flight, greater time at a higher apogee, they'll get more early warning for something like, say, a Sapson raid against something in, deeper in Russia, say 500 something kilometers into Russia, versus ATACMS being launched from Odessa Oblast towards Crimea. And then the other thing is there are other radars, other early warning radars in Russia that have some degree of coverage in Ukraine. And again, I hate to use his images. This is something that James Acton posted the other week as an example of two other early warning radars, one in Belarus, one in Russia, that has coverage over Ukraine. These might be other targets that, or other installations the Ukrainians would be concerned about and potentially neutralizing it if they thought it would be an impediment to their ability to generate ballistic missile raids. Again, either with ATACMS against targets in Russia, or a short depth in Ukraine, or a short depth into Russia if those targeting restrictions are ever further revised, or Sapson for deeper strikes into Russia proper.
Thank you. And then there's a question which not necessarily is relevant to this, but it's still on radars, and I think it's, it's kind of a big significant thing that was announced this week. The Swedes, they weren't allowed to send their Gripens, but something Swedish will fly over Ukraine anyways. And why for Ukraine? The Last Alliance asks. Given the Swedes' AVAX flight zone will be constrained by ORC-SAMs, how many more of those of the map will the 450-kilometer radar range cover? Someone should do an overlay on the map.
So Ukraine already has fairly decent sensor coverage and effector coverage for cruise missile defense. Decent. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done. What the AREI, the Swedish provided airborne early warning control platform, will let them do is not necessarily expand the size of their sensor envelope. It'll let them plug gaps in it. So there's a lot of gaps inside Ukraine where there's no radar coverage. This will let them have basically continuous coverage over everything in Ukraine during a raid. So that'll, there won't be dead zones where Shaheds or cruise missiles can evade Ukrainian awareness or situational awareness. Essentially, that's what it will do more than anything else.
Yeah, nothing really to add to that. I think, of course, it depends a bit, right? To what extent they are able to seamlessly integrate that into existing sensor coverage. But then, from what I've heard, I don't think that should not be that much of an issue. So yeah, largely agree, or pretty much agree with what John just said.
So one question I have is, what sort of anti-air missiles would the Russians likely be trying to use to take this kind of platform down, and what kind of range does it have?
The concern, well, there's two principal concerns. There's S-400, SA-21 with 40 N6, which is their 400-kilometer range active radar seeker surface-to-air missile, which is, the reference target for that is tankers and airborne early warning control platforms. And then there's R-37/R-37M axe head which is launched by the MiG-31 BMs and then the Su-35s. That would also be a concern. The ultimate issue that you run into, and I hope to God the Swedes have given this thought, once you include Belarus, everything in Ukraine is at least 400 kilometers away from the border. So, there's going to be some constraints on where this platform can operate. It's not going to be anywhere near the front line. The Ukrainians probably are not going to be able to use it very effectively for surveillance in either Russia or Belarus or in occupied Ukraine, just because of how far away it's going to have to be from the front line to avoid some of these threats. But it'll let them plug a lot of the gaps in their sensor coverage inside unoccupied Ukraine to prevent, cruise missiles or Shaheds from slipping through dead zones and sensor coverage.
Yeah, as you say, like if you put a 400-kilometer bubble around the occupied territories, Russian border, and Belarus, that's what's left basically.
So, well, again, there's a lot of practical things here that limit the kinematics. 400 kilometers is probably only for a target that's not maneuvering at all. An aircraft like Area is not very maneuverable, but it can maneuver somewhat. That'll cut down the range. So again, all of this is quantifiable, but it's not quantifiable at an unclassified level. And I have to assume, God willing, the Swedish and the Ukrainian governments have done the numbers here, and they've figured out a rough concept of operations for how they want to approach this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure did anyone see any more questions for Fabian and John?
I guess maybe just one real quick question, I guess mainly for John, but of course if Fabian wants to comment on it. John, I know this week you had a couple of tweets just about, obviously the Gimlers were flying this week. It was a wonderful sight to see, but I know there was some interesting stuff with the serial numbers, and I'm just wondering if that tells us anything or if it's just kind of a rabbit hole. And so just if you had anything generally to say about the Gimler strikes and then the serial numbers, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So just what I tweeted out. So the Russian Telegram had posted an image of what was allegedly Gimler's debris recovered in Belgorod, and it had a manufacturing date on there. Also the cage code. I pulled the cage code. It was produced by, I think, Cluj Industries. And what was interesting is the manufacturing date was September 07. Gimlers, well, M31 Gimler specifically, which is the unitary warhead, didn't achieve IOC, initial operational capability, and milestone C and full rate production approval until December 2008. So, assuming this is M31 Gimlers and not M30 Gimlers, that means this is one of the very first Gimlers produced from one of the low rate initial production lots issued prior to 2008. So this is very old. So M31A0. It also could be M30 Gimlers, M30A0, which is the OG Gimlers, the first one that had DPICM, payload dual purpose, improved conventional munitions, the cluster munitions that we all know and love. That was already in full rate production at the time, so it could be one of those. And the Russian Telegram has been claiming that Ukraine has been employing Gimlers with DPICM inside Belgorod, so it could be that as well. And I believe M30A0 entered full rate production in 2005, so that would have been from a full rate production lot, if it is M30 and not M31. But yeah, they're very old Gimlers.
And you think that indicates anything, that they're so old that
No, I don't think it indicates anything in particular. I would say that it would not shock me if we prioritized giving them older Gimlers rounds, just because they're older, they've depreciated more, lesser net book value for the purposes of determining presidential drawdown authority. So it makes sense from a sort of a financial management perspective, if you're trying to optimize there for send the most that you can with the available presidential drawdown authority, that you would prioritize sending the older stuff, because it's worth less and you can therefore send more of it up to the PDA cap.
Gotcha. Thanks for clearing that up. So yeah, I think as Erlend said, thanks so much, Fabian, for coming on. We really appreciate it, and you're welcome anytime.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
And I think now we're going to watch some combat footage. Is that right, Erlend?
Yeah, there's at least 10 videos lined up now for us. So if you want to hang out, Fabian, you're welcome to. But if you also want to chill out somewhere else, that's fine. But
no, I'd love to hang around. So that's super interesting.
Cool. Yeah. So first time on Tochnyi as well for Smokey. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today and Tochnyi stream, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here. I'm looking forward to talking about a little bit of my expertise with mechanized warfare and the Bradley fighting vehicle. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah. So basically, we just found you on Twitter, and you one tweet that caught Jonathan's attention was like, "Hey, I used to be on a Bradley, and if you have questions, please ask me anything." And the thread got very long and very interesting.
Yeah.
So and then it was very obvious to see that you're in support of giving more aid to Ukraine, and it just felt ideal to invite you to have a talk about the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. So thank you so much for showing up, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Erlend. I appreciate it, man. We'll go over a little bit about myself, everybody. You can call me Smokey. I was an infantryman in the United States Army from 2005 till about 2011, or December 2011, sorry. During that time, I served for 3 years and did 2 deployments to Iraq with the 1st Cavalry Division. I was a Bradley driver, Bradley gunner, and ultimately, for a short while, Bradley commander toward the end of my my time in service with 1st Cavalry Division. I think my favorite position on it would probably be the gunner of the Bradley. That's just the most fun for me. It's the 25 millimeter Bushmaster cannon is quite a machine, to put it lightly. And we could go ahead and play the first video, if you could, Erlend, and I'll go over what the Bradley is. So the Bradley fighting vehicle is a tracked infantry fighting vehicle, or IFV for short, that was produced by BAE Systems for use by the U.S. Army in response to the Soviet BMP program. It's been in service with the United States Army since 1981, when it was fielded as a replacement for the M113. It was named after General Omar Bradley, who was the commanding general of the U.S. Army during World War II. It's an immensely powerful and deadly weapons platform. The armament on the Bradley includes the M242 25 millimeter Bushmaster chain gun. That is its primary weapon. It shoots both 25 millimeter high explosive and 25 millimeter armor piercing rounds that you could switch with the flip of a switch while engaging the enemy, which is awesome. It also has an M240 Charlie, which is a machine gun variant that is 7.62 millimeter. And it also has one of everybody's favorites, the TOW missile launcher. Here in this video, you can see this is an infamous video. It's one of my favorites, I think, from the war so far, where a group of Bradleys rolls up on the most powerful and current tank in the Russian Army arsenal, being the T-90M. You can see this video, there's a lot going on here. You can see in the top right corner of it, there's definitely another Bradley fighting vehicle that is engaging targets on the ground at range. But we're paying more closer attention here to what's going on now. I think in the bottom right-hand corner of the video, you can see the Bradley engaging a T-90 off to the left there. So there's actually 2 Bradleys in this video. And they're in what it's kind of set up. They set up in what's kind of referred to as an L-shaped ambush. So that means that they can pretty much have free reign to open fire on that T-90, to where they're not risking engaging each other with their 25. So they're just able to zero in on that T-90. There you can see the T-90 deploys some smoke, probably to try to conceal itself from the Bradleys. They don't have too much luck with it, because what happens is these 2 Bradleys just kind of go at this T-90, hitting it with withering 25 millimeter fire all over it. And It does look like here that they're just using HE, which is interesting. And, I don't know the reason for that. That could be they might have already gone through all of their AP rounds. There could have been an issue in the turret or something. They couldn't engage with AP for whatever reason. But the fact that a 40-year-old American IFV was able to take out the most current main battle tank of the Russian army, to me, is incredibly impressive.
So,
Yeah,
Smokey,
they're engaging.
I have a question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question on this. So it's engaging with HE, but why isn't it engaging with the tow missile against the tank when that's kind of the main armament against tanks normally?
That's a great question, Erlend. And the reason here is because it takes a while to deploy the launcher. That takes about over 20 seconds. And then the biggest reason is in order to fire the tow missile, the vehicle has to be stationary. So the tow is optically or an optical and wire guided missile. So there's a wire that is attached to the physical missile itself. So when it is launched from the Bradley turret, it stays attached to it through that wire. So you have to keep the Bradley stationary to keep it connected to the wire. If you move too much, you risk detaching that, and then it's going to go wherever it goes. It's not going to stay on target. But the tow is awesome. We're going to look at a video of the tow later as well. But yeah, that's why they didn't engage with the tow missile here.
Yeah, so I guess maybe because of the close quarter combat situation, in this case, it's
Yes.
too risky to stay stationary, yes?
Yes, yeah, and if you look at that, the Bradleys are constantly moving. You're facing a main battle tank with I forget their caliber, 102 millimeter cannon on it. If that thing hits you, it's gonna hurt. That could kill the vehicle, that could kill the crew. So you want to keep moving when you're engaging. If there were another Bradley that were to roll up while it was preoccupied with those two, it could have engaged it with the tow. But these guys did a good job on staying moving, making sure that main battle tank could not hit them.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then so we can go here. So sorry. Yeah, we can go to the shorter video of that, the T90 best. I think that will be a better illustration here on it's just a little bit more of a condensed video that shows the capabilities of it. You can see the Bradleys operating a little bit better on them.
This one?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So you can see the on this video, you have the Russian flag there. That's noting how close it is to the T90 there when it rolls up on it. And you can see the Bradley kind of moves away, does the right thing. It's engaging it as it's moving. It's hitting it right in the turret, and then you can see also that the T90 engages back with its main gun, which is why they keep moving. Here's the end result is, I'm not sure what happened here. The crew could be panicking. It could have, obviously, the repeated impact of the 25 millimeter damaged the vehicle or damaged that T90 quite a bit. Here, this is great. Another thing in the war, another obviously very emerging technology on the modern battlefield is FPV drones. And you can see right there an FPV drone kind of finishes off this T90. I believe the T90s are crewed by 3 people. You can see all 3 of them run out. They're not moving too well, and I would assume after the multiple concussive or explosive blasts from that 25 millimeter, those guys are probably pretty rattled. So moving on here, the Bradley, again, it has a wide array of impressive offensive capabilities, but the true strength of the Bradley is in its defensive capabilities, and especially its armor. The Bradley is an incredibly survivable vehicle. That means it takes a lot to kill it. It's going to take a lot more to injure the crew or hurt the crew in the vehicle. It's unlike Russian vehicles like BMPs, where a couple well-placed rounds with something like a 25 millimeter is going to kill the vehicle. But we could go ahead and roll that third video, Erlend, if you could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
well,
anticipated it. So I
awesome
started.
already. Perfect. So yeah, you can see right here that is a Bradley getting hit. It's smoking. It's obviously damaged. But the remarkable thing here, again, here's another hit. Looks like probably an ATGM there, or that's a anti-tank guided missile, and another one. And the crew in this Bradley is able to evacuate the vehicle coming up here. So you can see here, this is an overhead view with the drone, the area they're engaging in. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. And another Bradley comes to the rescue here. You notice it pulls up, it starts engaging. That 25 millimeters going really hard. They drop the ramp, and they start getting to work on getting the guys out of there. Yep, you see them. Oh, and then that Bradley gets hit as well. So,
And he is
well, you see
blasting
that three?
full with the chain gun at the same time.
Yeah.
Even still after getting hit.
Yeah, he didn't stop. They didn't stop. You see there.
Yeah, I'm gonna play that
all
again
three of the
because
guys get in too.
I'm gonna play it again. The moment he pulls up, it's excellent, isn't it? The execution.
It is. It really is. There's that impact right there. They don't stop hitting it. The last two of the crew get in, and then they start moving, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to get the hell out of there. So they keep engaging with the 25, and they get the guys out. That's incredible. You see what that initial Bradley got hit with. It got hit by multiple ATGMs, RPG maybe. It looked like it hit a mine in the beginning. And for the crew to move under their own power and get out is just incredible. You see, unfortunately, they had to abandon it. Probably was destroyed after that. And that's one of the major reasons why I think the United States needs to get off the pot here and get the Ukrainian army way more Bradley fighting vehicles. You could see during these videos we're showing you is the impact that they're having. Russia has IFVs as well. That's true, but they don't have anything that could withstand what the Bradley can withstand. They don't have anything that has that range of firepower with the advanced optics, with the advanced the reliability and survivability of it. It's just something that they don't have. And I'll go on record here saying that the Bradley fighting vehicle, it's my opinion and borderline objective fact that the Bradley fighting vehicle is probably the most prolific killer on the battlefield as far as IFVs go on either side. Another great thing, we can go on to the next video, Erlend, is the TOW missile. I had a lot of people ask me about the TOW missile, and here we see an excellent video of a TOW engagement. You can see, I think it's a Russian T-80 tank coming up on a Bradley fighting vehicle. Obviously, there's a friendly drone who is probably let the Bradley know that they're coming, because as soon as that tank comes around the corner, they launch that TOW missile and just direct hit on it. So, that if you look at the distance there, that's an impressive range for it to hit it accurately. And TOW missiles are devastating to Russian armor. So I look forward to seeing more videos of it. This was the only one I could find, or I think we could find, of a TOW missile engaging. But I think that it's an incredible documentary piece of footage here, just showing how deadly the TOW missile is as far as anti-tank weapon goes.
Yeah, and these they got quite a lot of different variants, didn't they, as well? Maybe John knows a little bit about this, but didn't they get also like a top attack variant?
Oh god, they've gotten every variant of TOW under the sun. They've gotten 2B Arrow, which is the most recent one. That's radio frequency command link instead of wire guided, or instead of a wire command link, and that's top attack with tandem explosively formed penetrators. And they've gotten a bunch of the older ones as well.
That's awesome, John. I didn't know, honestly, the variants of the TOW. I had, in my personal experience, I never got to fire one in real life. I've seen them used in real life, but yeah, I haven't much experience with them personally. I just know they're awesome. But knowing that they have a top attack.
All of the really cool ones, I think, came into service after you got out of service, I think.
Yeah, I got out, 2011 was the last year I was in, so it's been a while. It's weird that it's been that long, honestly. So another, I would like to get on to the next video here. And this one's going to be a Kazivac operation. Sadly, it's a reality of war. People on both sides, and that includes Ukraine, do get killed in action, wounded in action. Here, we see a Bradley pull up into position while there are Russians advancing on their location, and they're evacuating some of their fallen comrades here. Again, apologies about that, but this is a fact of war. It's sad, and hopefully we give them more of what they need so that we see a lot less of this. But anyway, the point here being in this video is the Russians are advancing on them pretty rapidly. They're able to load up. There's no audio here, but you can hear a 25 millimeter chain gun firing on the audio. And then when here in a little bit, it's going to cut to, you can see the sparks there. It's from flying the rounds exiting the barrel. It'll pan out here, and you'll see the Russians advancing on them as they are pulling away while engaging the enemy. So, and let me tell you, when that ramps down and you're getting in and you're leaving, or you're exfilling or infilling, mounting or dismounting the vehicle, and the 25 millimeters going off above your head, it is really disorienting. So I give a credit to those guys for doing it so fearlessly. But yeah, here you can see they're just pounding advancing Russians that are coming down the trench line here, and looks like they got their mission accomplished. So another thing about the Bradley is that it's pretty quick for an armored vehicle. It has top speed of about 40 miles an hour, so it's able to move quickly. Again, this is another thing that they've been employing recently, where as I've seen a lot of videos lately of them utilizing the smoke grenades to offer some concealment to themselves and dismounted infantry. And that's a really good advantage. That's really good if you are trying to pick up the dismounts if they're under contact, or Kazivac operation, stuff like that. In the last video, maybe they were out of smoke or something. I think I did see them throw a smoke grenade out the back, though. But the use of smoke has been refreshing to see lately. They're doing a really great job of using that.
Yeah, that's the first year. It was, incredibly frustrating to see that it looked like, at least from our perspective, that they were trying to, be careful about using it, because they might, the suspicion we have is that they were scared not to get new rounds for their smoke deployers. But the problem is, if there is a good reason to use smoke, then you should use it, even if you think you're going to run out, because that might be the last time you will be able to deploy those smoke grenades.
Exactly. Yeah, if you're in a situation, you got to do it, man. You got to do it, regardless of the scarcity later on. There's not going to be a later on, maybe, if you don't use them in that situation. You're absolutely right. And I think, in the beginning, going back to last year with the counteroffensive, that they've come a long way. The Ukrainian army has come a long way in using modern mechanized warfare and combined arms tactics. They've about a year ago, we saw videos of Ukrainian columns where the vehicles were entirely too close together. They're riding in a straight linear line through open fields into kill zones, just one after the other. That was tough to watch, and thankfully I have not seen anything like that in quite some time. What I've seen, honestly, is the Ukrainians adapting, getting the real world experience on the or on the platform and in combined arms warfare that has led them to where they are now, where they are doing a hell of a job on implementing and fielding the Bradley. For all the Bradley strengths too, another thing I want to touch on is the weaknesses, which are thankfully very few, but they are there. I think the chief weakness on the Bradley and all armored vehicles in the war today is probably FPV drones. They're really hard to hit. If you get some like the Lancet, which are like flying broomsticks, incredibly fast. It's, I think that in general, that the introduction of drone warfare in this conflict is kind of akin to the introduction of tank warfare in World War I. It's a new thing. We're getting used to it. We're learning countermeasures, different, electronic warfare, jamming, or anti-drone systems, like, different launchers, nets, maybe. I'm not sure, but that is probably the chief weakness as far as a combat standpoint goes. And the only other one that I can truly think of is the amount of maintenance that it requires to keep these things running and running smoothly. I could tell you from my personal experience when I was deployed to Iraq, every 4 to 7 day rotation would be followed up by at least an 8 hour day in the motor pool, doing preventative maintenance checks and services, as well as repairs on the vehicle. That includes checking fluids, adding fluids, working on the batteries, making sure they're filled with distilled water, changing air filters, moving on to track pads to the actual track on the Bradley. All kinds of different stuff you got to do to it. That's not even combat damage, just normal wear and tear. And in order to do that, you need somewhere safe to work on the vehicle. So you need some sort of motor pool or something. I don't know how Ukraine's addressing that toward the front, but I'm assuming that they have something figured out where they can provide support to the vehicles and maintenance on a regular basis. Even at the zero line, even at the front, they've got to have some sort of rotation where they're pulling vehicles to be maintained.
I mean, we have seen
down cycle.
Yeah, we have seen them, picking up damaged Bradleys quite often and pulling them back.
Yeah.
And I assume that they then proceed to load them on a truck and get them somewhere safe. But yeah, salvaging an armored vehicle in the middle of a field, which is close to the front line, is a risky operation, and you need really specialized vehicles to do that, and especially trained crew as well. How is it to change like a track on a Bradley? If you mentioned it, and I think it's probably something you'll never forget if you've done it.
Yeah, well, it depends. They're ideally you're doing that back in the rear, where the track is worn out after use, and you're back in your motor pool, and you're safely changing the track, and that requires quite a lot of people. We would have the entire, or about half a platoon, help us do it, because you have to move sections of track. I can't tell you exactly how many off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've done it, thankfully, because it's miserable. But you got to carry. I'd say it's about over 100 pounds. You got to carry multiple times, 20, 30 times each person, carrying sections of 4 of the track. And that's miserable. Very, very difficult work, very labor intensive. And then, apart from that, which I'm sure has happened, I haven't seen any videos of it, is when you throw track, while you're operating, when you're in combat. That is a very difficult situation to be in. It requires the work of pretty much the entire crew. God willing, you have people covering you, another Bradley, drones, dismounted infantry, while you work to get that track put back on the vehicle. A lot of times you're doing it under fire. It's incredibly terrifying in real life when you're getting shot at and you're trying to get the track back on the Bradley. But, you got to do what you got to do, try to get that vehicle moving again so you can get out of there. And, it's, depends on where it breaks. A lot of times it'll just slip off the rollers, and then you got to get an impact tool. You got to unbolt it, drag it, move it into place, get the track back on there, and then apply grease to get the pistons back to the optimal tension level so that it doesn't happen again. But yeah, no, throwing track in combat and changing track in the rear are two different things. I would hate to do either of them, but doing it in the rear would be the preferred method.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, do you want to proceed to the next video?
Yeah, absolutely. Where are we at now here? This is a great one. This is a MTLB being engaged, I believe. Yeah, let's see here. So Bradley's rolling up there.
No, it's a wood line.
Okay, yeah, no, they're engaging targets in the wood line here. So this is my only complaint here is how lonely that Bradley is. It doesn't look like I don't see another one, and that's probably due to, honestly, combat losses. They've lost quite a few of these vehicles. So again, another reason for us to get more of these. But if you notice, they're kind of shooting into the tree line, a little slight elevation. And it's my opinion there that they're doing that because there's probably Russian fortification in there, like a trench position that's really common for them to do. And every wood line separating every field, they're setting up defenses. So that Bradley shooting at that little bit of elevation where the rounds are impacting in the trees, that what that's actually doing is creating kind of like an airburst effect, blowing it up over their heads, so that that shrapnel is raining down on them in the trench, which that's that's more dead Russians, that's more dead Katsaps. That's what we're that's what it was built to do. The Bradley was designed to fight Russians, and the fact that it's doing that and doing so well at it is it's great to see. I'm a little bit envious that I'm not able to do it myself, honestly, but just excellent use of the mobile or the firepower on the Bradley here, and you can see there all the round casings on top of that Bradley is they've been shooting that thing all day. So
I'm guessing that this is like a real classical example of what the Bradley should do, which is supporting infantry. Because I assume if they are softening
Yes.
up this target in the first place, that means that someone is planning to move into that tree line.
Absolutely, you see that linear or the tree line adjacent to it. And I bet you that there's probably Ukrainian infantry in there that are ready to go in and mop it up. That depends. I mean, they're getting contact too by, it looks like, some sort of maybe artillery or mortars going off there. Yeah, right there. So it's tough to say, but I would assume that there's some sort of infantry there that's about to move on that fortified position.
Yeah,
But that is one of the main purposes of it. And obviously also it's dual purpose tank killer too. But
I mean,
supporting infantry.
You see the Bradley here, and there's
Yeah.
artillery strikes here, and the whole field is littered with craters.
Yeah. They've been trying to maneuver on that for a while, I bet. But yeah, you see that a lot. That's every field in Ukraine, I feel, in Donbass area looks similar to that.
Yep, I'll pull up the next video if you want to
Sure.
go to it's number 8.
Yeah. Oh, here's another one. You see they're just laying down fire there with the 25 millimeter. And you can see just the volume of it. You see the explosion there. It's got a pretty big kill radius on the 25 millimeter. Anything within a few meters of every one of those blasts definitely felt it. They're not going to fight anymore today. I can tell you that much. So that's another great video showing the firepower of it. Just pounding those Russian positions into submission, which is something we like to see. It's something I enjoy seeing anyway. But they're just doing a great job with it. And then here, this is a good one.
This is from
this one, I believe, is an MTLB, right?
Yeah, and it's just outside Avdiivka after Avdiivka was when they pulled out, right?
Yep. And you see the Bradley rolling up on it now. You see those Russians it seems like they know it's coming. They dismounted really quick. They threw their weapons off it. This guy tries to run away. And, this shows two things. First, the accuracy of the Bradley, first round, second round, third round, every single round's hitting that vehicle. And secondly, how shitty Russian vehicles are. And I'm not saying that they're not deadly, but, like just a few high explosive rounds completely killed this armored vehicle. And realistically, I think the first couple of rounds probably disabled it. But that's a great showcase as to the firepower of the Bradley on an armored vehicle, which also illustrates the dual purpose nature of it, being not just to support infantry, but also to kill Russian armor, which it does an excellent job of, as we're seeing.
Yeah, and you see the guy saw the drone. They knew.
Yeah, you watch these guys. The guy throws his gun off. He just throws his weapon off to get off in time. So yeah, no, they heard that the Bradley was coming. So that's another big thing, is that obviously these guys are scared of it. They know what's coming. They're trying to get away from it. And I'd be willing to venture that after that Bradley took out that MTLB, that it likely turned its attention on those dismounts and wiped them out too.
But you can see the moment when this guy, he spots the drone.
Yep, he sees it.
and that's what they really stopped quickly there.
Yeah. Not even they're not even stopped and they're jumping off. So they know something's coming. The guy just throws his gun.
Yeah. This
They
is
just
not
get
how you
off.
want to dismount. And this is a funny thing that we can see all the time, that they're sitting on top of the vehicle, which is because they know that it's really badly protected, and you don't want to be inside a metal box and it's hit by, something like this.
Yeah, no, and you see that a lot, and I think it's just, you know, I think part of it is yes, they know they're not any better protected inside that vehicle. Maybe from the initial round, but they know if they're sitting in there, they're not going to have a good time when that 25 millimeter is ripping through it. So, but that's one thing. I think the other thing is that hopefully what we're starting to see is maybe the starting that they don't have much equipment to ride in anymore, so they're trying to cram as many people onto these things as possible. So, I mean, obviously, the Russians aren't anywhere near out of equipment. That is dwindling, but they still have enough. But I think we're starting to see them try to be a little bit more conservative, just out of a necessity to try to move infantry to assault positions and stuff like we're seeing here.
Yeah, and I think another reason is also, if you look at when they dismount, right? They don't have this large, nicely opened and closed hatch, which is on the Bradley, the M113, the CV90. They all have a is it a hydraulic hatch, I think, is it? It's a hydraulic hatch, and they open very quickly, and they have a large entry and exit. While this one has very small doors, it's really difficult to go in and out from it, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see them riding on top, really.
Yeah, that could be too.
They don't have a lot of time. Between they jump off here, there's a few seconds, and then the MTLB is zeroed in, and it would have taken them another 30 seconds at least to dismount, maybe even a minute, because the doors are really, really badly designed on MTLB and also on the BMB.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes with, just the Russian way of war anyway. They don't really care about individual lives. You could see that in, where meat waves and YOLO charges at Ukrainian line, or, the Ukrainian lines. And I think, they don't design their vehicles to protect the crew. They're just designing these things to move people from point A to point B and keep the crew a little bit protected so that they can move move people around. They're not, focused on the ease of mounting and dismounting, because they don't truly care if they, on an individual level, if the soldiers or crew survive, which is again a big difference between Western ideologies and the Russian way of war.
Yep, absolutely.
And we could were you able to edit that last video?
So this is the fresh video from yesterday or a couple of days ago.
I first saw it today. Was the first time I saw it this morning here, but here I can't. It looks like are those BTRs?
Yep.
Yeah, those are BTRs. So you can see right there they got hit. They're getting hit with a 25 millimeter right as they come out there. Looks like they're trying to deploy some smoke here to do the same thing that you see on the Bradley. They're trying to kind of conceal it, but I don't think that's going to be too much help for them, because one of the vehicles is disabled. They have the sights trained on it already. Here it just looks like forgive my language here, a clusterfuck. I don't think anybody knows what they're doing. These guys are just running and hiding.
I mean, why are they, dispersing in the middle of the field? Well, it's because they got disabled, right? It's not because they want to be there.
No. But I mean, they're just, they're not all. They definitely don't want to be there. I can tell you that much.
I mean,
but,
this is
they're just running every which direction, though. You see them running forward. They're not.
This is a horrible situation to be in. Absolutely horrible, because you're in the middle of a field.
It's like fish in a barrel.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide. I'll tell you that I don't think any of them survived this, to be honest.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't think any of them did. I think they probably shot and engaged with the 25 millimeter until they stopped moving, and then probably sent, some sort of reconnaissance to go check it out. But you could see there the 25 millimeter rounds impacting in close proximity to that infantry. These guys looks like they were honestly probably just conscripts. Well, unfortunately for them, they probably didn't receive much training. They're just kind of flying blind, and yeah, they didn't even know what to do or what to react there. And again, that is probably the worst possible position you would want to be in, getting engaged like that. And another thing to note is just how absolutely powerless they were. They were not able to engage at any rate back with the Bradleys. Those BTRs couldn't do anything. They were offering, no, they weren't offering protection. They weren't offering covering fire. They were disabled pretty instantaneously, and then that just gives the Bradley and its crew free reign to just chew up that infantry with the HE rounds, which are just absolutely devastating. I can tell you when engaging humans with a 25 millimeter, it's very devastating. I would echo your sentiments. I don't think any of those guys lived. And yeah, that's about it for my videos and the analysis that I had there. I'm sure that there's plenty of people that have questions, and at this time, I'd just love to field those questions. If you could just ask away.
Yeah, so I guess first to the panel, if anyone on the panel has any questions you sit in with, and then we'll go to the comment section. And if for the people in the comments, then please, if you have questions for Smokey, type away, and then we'll go, we'll try and answer everything. Yeah, so first to the panel.
A lot of questions covered by the chat and you guys, but I guess have you heard anything about the Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicles, the ones they make, and how do you think they rate or compare to the Bradley?
What are they making? Are they making their own variants of BMPs or?
Yeah, it's like the BTR-3, I think, right? Is John? Do you know?
It's the BTR-4.
It's BTR-4, I think.
Yeah, so it's not really. It's I'm gonna say it's not directly comparable to Bradley because it's a wheeled AFV APC type thing derived from the BTR lineage, so it's pretty different.
Yeah, I don't really have too much of an opinion on their vehicles. I'm not. I'll be real with you. The Bradley, I'm more of a subject matter expert, but foreign to me armored vehicles, I don't know very much about them other than the Bradley is excellent at destroying them. As far as the Russian equipment goes, there are plenty of awesome IFVs, and I think Ukraine is definitely capable of producing some of its own. And I hope that their R&D department within their Department of Defense is looking closely at this war and working on developing something that would suit their needs and the needs of the modern battlefield in general. But as far as the BTR-4 stuff like that, I don't know. I know the CV90 is awesome. The Marder, German Marder, is probably pretty great too. I don't have a whole lot of experience with them though, but I think I might be a little bit biased here, but in my opinion, I think the Bradley's the best out of what we've seen in the Ukrainian conflict.
The chat has a lot of questions. They want you to compare it to the CV90, so we'll see. We'll see how you do.
I wish I could, guys. I really wish I could. I am honestly not. I'm sure some of you guys could have some things to contribute with that as well. But as far as a comparison to the CV90, I haven't seen a whole lot of CV90 combat footage, and I think part of the reason behind that is that they received comparatively very, very few of them compared to what they did the Bradleys or Martyrs. So I'd love to learn more about it, though. I can tell you that.
Any of the panel have any questions before we go to the chat?
Well, what do you think about the Ukrainian camo patterns that they've been painting on them?
I think they're pretty cool. I've seen this looks like a pretty common variant, and I think that's probably pretty good for the area they're operating in. There's especially this time of year. There's a battle, or the area is pretty war torn and dreary, but there's a lot of green, a lot of forests and stuff that they're rolling through. So I think that Looks like they're trying to do a little bit of like a digital pattern breakup too, which I think is interesting. And they're also making use of you can see on this image here like a ghillie suit type thing to kind of more obscure it, which I don't know if that does anything for like IR. Probably not, but that's definitely going to obscure it from like your typical aerial drone that might be looking at a faraway wood line where the Bradley's under some concealment and with that camouflage.
Yeah, but and this one doesn't have the ERE on it.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was something I forgot to touch on too. Is the ERA, the explosive reactive armor? I've seen Bradleys in Ukraine that did not have it. I've seen them with it, and I could tell you, that could be just the needs of the individual units and how they prefer to operate. If they need to prioritize speed and maneuverability, they might opt for not using the explosive reactive armor. But because the explosive reactive armor is going to weigh down the vehicle significantly, it's going to make it quite a bit slower. I think it'll cut down the top speed to about 30 miles an hour instead of 40. It makes it easier, in my opinion, also to do things like throw track. So, I think they're utilizing ERA kind of at the discretion or at unit level discretion is what it seems like to me. But that's also ERA has a lot of advantages. That's definitely going to help survivability. That's going to help soak up things like RPGs, ATGMs, other types of explosive munitions that are hitting it. But again, if they're prioritizing speed, then they might opt not to use the ERA.
Yeah. So how much does it actually impede maneuverability? Since you said it's pretty heavy.
You run the risk, like I said, it makes it easier to throw track on it. And when in a lot of the videos we're seeing, you're seeing these Bradleys going through open fields, through craters and rough terrain. So that's going to weigh it down a lot. The ERA is going to weigh that down a lot more. So, the terrain definitely has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. This one has the ERA box on it, both on
Yep.
the sides and on the front.
Yep.
Yeah, they're very large compared to the Ukrainian ones.
Yeah, I forget what those ones are called, but yeah, these I think again maybe I'm being a little bit biased. I would put this explosive reactive armor on before I would put other ERA on. I don't know if I haven't looked up too much into it if that's like a NATO standard ERA that they're using, because I have seen videos where there's ERA on other stuff too. So I'm not sure if that's standard or not. Also,
I'm not sure if the DoD uses a standard filler between the Bradley reactive armor tiles and what's on Abrams, but the exterior design is not standardized as far as I'm aware. But they very well could be using the same filler.
Okay, right on. Well, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the insight there. I don't know too much about the nuts and bolts like that, like what's what explosives are in there or anything. I just know the most basic basic stuff about it, I guess. But
I'm not super familiar with what the reference threat is for Brat relative to what the Soviets and the Russians put together with Contact 1 and Contact 5. I'm pretty sure they had a bunch of different reference threats than we had, but that would be something I guess interesting to look at in the future.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's a great profile picture of the Bradley there. You can see it from the front. Look at the tracks, how the looks like those track pads are quite a bit worn. Actually, you should probably change those, but that's the nature of it. And that's the other thing too, is changing the track pads. That's something that takes you got to do it often. Like when I was in Iraq, it was every couple of weeks in the summertime we were changing the pads, and then like once a month changing track on the Bradley. So
maybe you can help me out a little bit, Joseph, with which questions to pull up.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a look. I think there were a couple of questions comparing it to the Striker. I guess like you mentioned a couple of vehicles. Like what would we put in the category of the type of jobs that Bradley does? What other vehicles would we put in that category? You mentioned Martyr, CB90. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So like Martyrs or IFVs, they were, well, I don't know much about them. They're different. They have like a much smaller turret. It looks like it's just a single occupier or single occupant turret on the Martyr. The CV90 looks quite a bit bigger, and I think they fulfill the same roles. Ultimately, they're infantry support and tank killers. I know a lot of them. I'm guessing they probably have similar NATO standard optics to use. So yeah.
Yeah, Erlend, do you have anything you want to say about the CB90 compared to the Bradley? I know we talk a lot about CB90s on the server, but I don't really understand what's happening.
Well, so the CV90, I'll try and pull up a picture while I talk here. It has a lower profile. I think if not the engine is not more powerful, it certainly is has faster acceleration and a lower profile compared to the Bradley. And I think if you want to kind of compare the design philosophies, that I guess they want to be a little bit more nimble. You see that it has a lot more pointy armor here.
It looks
as well.
like it's lower to the ground too, like a little bit.
Yeah, and I've seen them
The
both.
cannon is way bigger.
And I've seen them both next to each other in real life. And the Bradley, even though if it's not a lot taller, it looks a lot. It's a much bigger target for the naked eye because it's a lot more boxy. So the philosophy is definitely that it wants to be a little bit more nimble and stealth. This one is the exact version that the Ukrainians got, because the problem is, if you want to compare the CV90 to the Bradley, which CV90 do you want to compare to the Bradley? Because there are so many variants of the CV90, and that's kind of the big difference between the CV90 and the Bradley. The Bradley does have several different versions, but the CV90 has completely different setups. Like this one has a 40 millimeter Bofors cannon, which is incredibly powerful for a
yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, this cannon is insane. It's there's no IFV that can compete with this cannon. Unfortunately, that's not going to be produced anymore. They're going to 35 millimeter for the new ones. But
okay. Interesting. I wonder why that is.
It's a philosophy thing that most nations are going with a 35 millimeter. I think the Dutch, the Danes, the Finns. We have a 30 millimeter chain gun on ours, the Norwegian one. The whole platform is a lot more, with the different iterations. But the one the Ukrainians have got is the one with the 40 millimeter. Unfortunately, they didn't get the spike missile because Israel blocked that. So this could be fitted with a spike missile, but they didn't because they weren't allowed to, which is a very sad thing for the Ukrainians, because the spike missile is really, really good alternative to the TOW. But hopefully that will be fixed. I think maybe it is, or they've fitted another anti-tank missile on the new ones that Ukraine are getting, because they are getting another 50 or so newly produced.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I wonder if they're able to like Frankenstein like a TOW setup on there or something. I know they've done some interesting things with fitting JDAMs, guided glide bombs onto their fighter jets, and I wonder, or the Frankensams that we've seen, like with the. So I'm wondering if they're able to do something like that, across platforms. I think that would be pretty cool.
I mean, Saab does have various options if they want to put missiles on them. So, but the best alternative would be the Spike one, because it can be guided by a drone, which is very cool. But we will see. They're getting a completely new set of CV90s at some point. I don't know exactly when. I hope soon. But the problem is that basically all of Europe has ordered CV90 except Germany and the UK. So if they were to get them before this war is over, because I think the waiting line and the production line right now is probably something like 2030. So I hope that they manage to jump the line somehow and someone gave up their position in the order book, because or else it's going to be way too much waiting time on those.
Yeah, that's that's one thing that concerns me is I haven't looked too much into it. The U.S. Biden has said that they're going to be sending a good amount more Bradley fighting vehicles, but my question is when. They need them right now. If they were to, I forget the number. I had it written down here. Like we sent 186 Bradleys to Ukraine, and I would be willing to venture that they've lost a considerable amount of those. If we were able to send out of our stores in storage, which hopefully they've been hard at work on refurbishing and getting ready for combat, I would love to see like a tranche of 500 or more Bradleys sent, because I think, a number like 186, close to 200, that's enough to, showcase or, make a little bit of an impact. But sending out of, the U.S. has something like 4,000 Bradleys between the ones being operational and a couple thousand of them in storage. If we could send 1,000 of those, that would change the tempo. I think it would truly change the tempo on the battlefield, as far as fighting on the ground is concerned. Adding that much more firepower, just in volume with the Bradley, I think would be a boon for Ukrainian defense right now. And even in remaining in a defensive posture, the Bradley is still very lethal. Its sights, I don't think I got into it too much, but its accurate range, you could shoot the 25 millimeter accurately up to almost 2 miles. And that's an unbelievable distance. You can't see that far with the naked eye. You could be engaging targets with the Bradley, which it looks like they have been. I've seen some very long shots. You could engage targets that have absolutely no idea that what they're getting hit with and where they're getting hit from. So, that's another huge benefit to the Bradley. And I'm sure other platforms like the CV90 as well is, just the utility of having that kind of range on an infantry support vehicle / tank killer is just something else. And I don't think Russia has anything remotely close to that as far as accuracy and actual useful application goes. So,
But by the
I
way,
might be wrong in that, but
you can actually see the copper wires there. That's kind of cool.
Yep.
Super cool.
Yeah, you could see them go out there, and then they'll probably drop here, I'm guessing. Yep. Oh, yeah, you could see them drop from the impact. So yeah, that's great. I didn't notice that in the first iteration of that video, but yeah, you could totally see the tow wires. So that gives you an illustration of why the vehicle needs to remain stationary when you're using the tow. Which it sounds to me like, you got to keep in mind the tow missile is pretty old. This is not modern technology, but the fact that this 40-year-old platform is able to do things like take out Russia's most modern made battle tank is impressive. And I mean, I'm looking forward to. I know that the BAE just recently restarted production of the Bradley. They are doing a A4 variant. It's kind of like what looks like a stopgap between that and the XM30, I think is the next IFV the US is coming out with. So that's going to be really cool to see. And I would love to see them, get some real life testing on the proving grounds in Eastern Ukraine right now with that, because those have what looks like way more electronic warfare and anti-drone. And if I remember correctly, an upgraded missile system, hopefully. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing that there's no other IFV than the CV90 that actually have like anti-drone systems embedded in the vehicle natively.
Yeah.
And that that BAE is that BAE is now, I think they're just upgrading or basically refurbishing old hulls and doing a total overhaul and adding some new systems, because I'm not sure if there's any new hull production, and I don't think they really need it either. But that they're doing this now means that someone up in the system understood that this is something we need to address now. Can't wait to the XM30 project, which they didn't even they haven't even chosen which vehicle it's going to be on the XM30, as far as I understand. Because
I think they've got it. I think it's. I think they got that decided on now. I
they
think.
did. Okay,
But
good.
they're still not. I mean, they're not going to be getting to the first army units that or the XM30 until at least 2030. You
Yeah.
know, so it's going to be some time before we see them, which is I think why they're getting
Yeah.
the new Bradleys done as a stopgap.
Yeah, then that's really good to see that they're actually reacting to this, because yeah, it's really, the Ukrainians are putting EW on them. They're doing all kind of things to protect against drones and operating as just a lone Bradley instead of being in a pair or a platoon, because probably they want to avoid being detected as much as possible, right? And
I think that's part of it. Yeah, I think
Uh,
the other part again is scarcity. I
Sure.
think they've lost quite a bit of them. So that's because, like, ideally, I think you want to have another Bradley close by. If you get hit or something, you're going to want, like in that video we watched earlier, you're going to want one to be able to get there quickly, to be able to help you out. But there's another thing I'm noticing here. There's that little box that's on the right side of the turret. That it's called the CIV. That is the commander's up on the turret, up in the Yep, right there. That's the commander's individual site. And what that is a site that's completely independent from the site that the gunner uses. The commander of the Bradley can use that to look anywhere on the vehicle, or not on the vehicle, anywhere in space, and they could do stuff like target designate, where they could, designate a target, and the gun will go automatically to that target for the gunner to engage it, which is really cool. And we had a lot of utility with that in Iraq. In asymmetrical warfare, like counterinsurgency operations, we got a lot of use out of the CIV and target designating like that. But yeah, it's the same kind of principle or optic and principle as the gunner site. It uses FLIR, which is, I forget something, type of IR. It's the green screen that you see on a lot of the videos where you see the gunner engaging through the green screen. But yeah, that's another great inclusion that makes the Bradley all that much more deadly.
Yeah, so I got a question here in the back channels as well.
Sure.
So you did touch into it a little bit, but in the beginning of the summer offensive last year, which was an absolute disaster, right? We saw them move up in close columns together with heavy armor and these demining. What was it? A
mine rollers.
Yeah, mine scrapers. They were scrapers, right?
Yeah.
And they got stuck in the middle of the field, and they were not dispersing. They were really, really tied together, and basically took out almost the entire column in one of the cases, and in another more than half of the column. And then since that, we haven't really seen anything like it. And what do you think they learned compared to that first devastating pictures that we saw? And what do you think about the development and in tactics? Because I think it's very fascinating, and we've seen them doing something that looks like mobile defense when they were pulling out of Avdiivka as well, which I think was very, very impressive.
Yes, absolutely. And this is kind of like the story of life here. In your life, you go to college, you learn, the basics of your career path, and then you figure out, once you're done with learning in the classroom, that 90% of what you're going to need to know is going to be learned on the job, right? That goes the same for military training. I remember being a young private going through basic training and thinking, oh man, I'm hot shit now. And when I got to my unit in Iraq, I was sorely mistaken. But that is kind of, I think, what happened is just lack of real world experience. They did all this stuff in a classroom. I think their training on it might have been a hodgepodge between, obviously, they're learning from NATO instructors. I know they did training on them in Germany, UK, and other countries, I'm sure. But the training on training grounds is completely different in application than real world combat. There's nothing that's going to replicate when you're in training, getting shot at by training rounds, the feeling that you have, the fear, the anxiety, the terror that you feel when you're getting shot at with live ammunition by people that actually want to kill you. So, they had that unfortunate baptism by fire where we saw, like you said, like the entire column getting annihilated in a kill zone by their alligator helicopters. They didn't have adequate anything to mitigate those at all. It seems like they had, an artillery trained in on them, ATGMs, SPGs, any number of everything that they just hammered that column with. And again, I think, some of the training might have been a little bit by the old school, old guard in the Ukrainian military that would have, kind of put them in a position to bunch up, get close, survival in numbers, maybe. I don't know their battle doctrine, the old Soviet way of battle doctrine. I'm not familiar with it, but I think you could chalk up the losses that we saw in the initial part of the counteroffensive as inexperience, very poor command decisions on top of that. And I think a little bit of NATO allies kind of goading them into doing it because, in my opinion, they should have probably just remained in a defensive posture. And not.
Zaluzhny was not, he was not happy with that. He basically said in his essay that doing that was never going to succeed if you read between the lines. And that means, for some reason, someone made that decision for him. He had to go with it. He's not a politician. He was a military commander, and he has to obey orders. And, he ordered that attack to take place. And anyone that watched them, start that offensive that understood a little bit about minefields and kill zones.
Oh God, I forgot about. I didn't even mention the mines.
I mean, the largest anti-vehicle and anti-personnel combined minefield we've ever had in Europe, right? So
and that's what I was saying. From the get-go, is the amount of ground that is just absolutely saturated with mines. After it's going to be sad after this conflict is over. They're never going to stop demining Ukraine. There's going to be mines there forever. But just the saturation of mines that they employed there, just it was bad. Watching that hurt, and I think that they have adapted. Now after having been baptized by fire, obviously they're employing and utilizing not just Bradleys but other Western equipment, and their equipment also. I think they've adjusted their tactics and are doing a much better job now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to see how successful all of the videos that you gave me, basically, they're operating in maybe pairs, maybe 3, but in close proximity, maximum there are 2 Bradleys operating. I think that's very interesting. Not sure if it's just because of scarcity. I think that there's also some thought behind it, to be honest. But it seems to be a lot more successful anyways, and they don't lose nearly as many Bradleys now as they did in the beginning. So
definitely.
So we got a question.
Go ahead.
We got a question to it was probably during one of the videos from Nectarn, which asks if during one of the videos if they would also employ its machine gun or just the 25mm high explosive shells. And I'm assuming that was during one of the engagement. I'm not sure which one, but you can basically give us an answer for when you would use the coaxial.
Yeah, so the coaxial, it's great for infantry. You're at close range with infantry. It's a great way to engage them with. It's got a very high rate of fire. It's going to chew them up. Obviously the 25mm is the main gun on it, but the thing when a lot of times when you would engage with coax would be when you're loading the 25mm. So the Bradley carries like 300 rounds in the turret that are loaded. You could blow through those 300 rounds, as you've seen, probably pretty quickly. But luckily, the Bradley also has about 1,000 rounds stored in the rear of the vehicle underneath the floor. And the coax can be used while loading the 25mm. So if you're in a situation where you have infantry advancing on you while you're reloading, the commander could engage with the coax while the gunner is reloading the 25 millimeter.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna stop this video because it's going towards the end. But we have more questions.
I think you guys covered this one a little bit, but Friedman123 asks, like, are the Ukrainians using the Bradleys more aggressively than we would expect from U.S. deployment, since we've seen a lot of footage of them going toe-to-toe with Russian armor at the main line of contact? So, yeah, if you guys want to elaborate on that.
You know, that's a tough question to answer. They're using them more aggressively. I don't know. Like I said, I think there's kind of a little bit of a scarcity issue going on right now. They're using them well, but I don't think that they're trying to be, more aggressive or, like, trying to be, in an offensive posture with them at the moment. I think they're kind of using them to hold them back and, do limited, maybe limited counteroffensives to retake fortifications and stuff. I don't think that they're going to or using them aggressively as, a means of larger counteroffensive operations simply because they just don't have enough of them right now. I again am a firm advocate of getting them more as soon as possible so that they can use them more aggressively, in tandem with other things like we're about to see imminently. I think the introduction of F-16s and having that air superiority added to the docket in your combined arms operations is going to help you immensely with vehicles on the ground and stuff, because that's going to help mitigate things like the glide bombs that Russia is using massively, and just help you overall in general with bringing the air power situation a little bit back more into alignment and peer-to-peer in nature.
Gotcha. And then a couple of people asked just generally about like airburst rounds. Does the Bradley have airburst rounds? And then also someone asked, like, how many different types of rounds does it carry? So I think those kind of go together. Go ahead.
Sure. So I don't know if they have airburst rounds. I'm not saying they don't. I hope they do. That would be awesome if they had airburst rounds. I know that when I was in, they were talking about getting airburst rounds. You know, the laser rangefinder, you would have to designate, figure out the range that would communicate with the laser rangefinder and do whatever internal computations to come up to when to detonate. But as far as I know, they don't have them. I haven't seen anything that would indicate that they do. There was those videos where they were shooting kind of elevated into the tree line, and I think that kind of simulate an airburst. But and then the rounds, it carries two types of rounds. It would carry 25 millimeter HE and armor piercing.
Gotcha. Let me see if there were anyone. Someone asked how many radio nets were your Bradleys on? Like, how many, like, I assume like sort of radio channels, because he's saying like platoon, dismounts, company. So I think that's what he means, right?
Yeah. We had two. We would use like company level and squad or company and platoon net for our communications. I'm assuming that the Ukrainians probably have something along those lines too.
Well, yeah. So, like, this is a big issue in Ukraine. Actually, communication is one of the biggest problems that Ukrainians are facing, and it's probably due to the scaling problem, where the Ukrainian ground forces are now probably 3 times or 4 times as large as they were at their largest since 2014, and as you know, scaling signals that quickly is really difficult. Also because it's not the first thing you're going to prioritize, because you need to put men in the trenches and then on the front lines, and it's just really, really difficult to prioritize that when you don't, you're really struggling at the front lines. But they have serious issues on fielding what is a normal, brigade command net. Accompanied by battalion net, company nets, and platoon nets. That's not something that is normal in Ukraine, unfortunately. But what they do is a lot of ad hoc solutions for communications, and that's fine, and it's a good plug in the gap. But there is a lot of problems with communications, and I'm not sure if even the 47th has more than 2 nets available. I would be very surprised if they did, to be honest, because that's a thing I read all the time, is that they only have the battalion net, and then they might have like a completely different radio set which they bought themselves for company and platoon level, and that's not ideal because you're going to run into a lot of different problems.
Yeah, I would be leery on doing that just because, if you're using the radios like in the Bradleys or Singars, which are, encrypted, secure, using stuff like walkie-talkies or stuff that they're buying themselves, I would be leery about doing that just because the Russians, the enemy could be listening.
Well, they're really good
at
they're really good at using encrypted radios, even if they buy them on the civilian market. But the problem isn't that they're encrypted or not. It's more that when you're operating on so people might not know this, but it's not just like a walkie-talkie radio to talking directly to another radio. That's not how it works. So they talk through a relay station, which extends the range of the whole. So basically, you don't need to be in range of the other end which you're talking to. You just need to be in range of the relay station. And the problem with utilizing ad hoc solutions is that, yes, you can get relay stations for those as well, but that's not normally how they operate, unfortunately. They just call them amplifiers, but they're really relay stations. You're basically receiving and then retransmitting from every single handset or radio that is operating under that net. And yeah, that's a big issue in Ukraine, and I hope that they're, with time, going to be able to address that. But you can probably explain why that is important in the Bradley, right? Like, why do you need these different nets?
Yeah, so you're going to be communicating, the operation kind of is broken down to different levels. Like, let's say you have a battalion level operation, so you're going to have battalion communicating with the company or whatever. But from an internal Bradley crew, your platoon net, the communication with your platoon, or the smallest, on the hierarchy of that communication tree or hierarchy chart. So you're going to have one on platoon net just to communicate internally with the platoon, and then as well as company net to coordinate platoon movements and requests with the company. And I know that might be a little bit confusing to some of our listeners, just like the hierarchy chart. So you have a platoon, which is made up of a few, three mechanized platoons made up of like 3 dismount squads and 2 vehicle sections, which is 4 vehicles in total. From there in the company, you're going to have about 3 platoons, 3 to 4 platoons, plus a headquarters element as well. And then at battalion level, you're going to have 4 to 5 companies, yada, yada, yada. But the importance of having the 2 different nets for your communication is being able to communicate firstly with your platoon for, whatever your platoon needs are. And then, reporting up to higher for company level requests like medevac, CASEVAC, whatever.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions from chat that I saw, Erlend. If we have any more questions from the panel.
Nope.
Maybe we can explain why a wheeled platform is inferior to a tracked platform. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So I did see, I think, somebody comment on why the Bradley and not the Striker. And I have experience working close to Strikers, and it always came to pass that the Bradleys had to come and bail them out. They're not as survivable. I don't think they have as thick of armor. I believe their tires are, of the run flat variety, but still, you've got a 6x6 drivetrain, I believe. I think they have 3 tires on each side, So that's 6 different variables of something that could break on it, especially if you're going over terrain. And um, the striker does have an advantage of being faster. It's less maneuverable. It has less firepower. It has less armor. Um, it has less capability going over terrain. Yeah, it could get stuck easier. Maneuver again. I want to go back to maneuvering it because a Bradley can do what's called pivot steering, where it could spin 360 degrees on a dime. A striker, you're going to have to do. I don't know if my European friends are familiar with Austin Powers. There's a scene in it where he's trying to back up a golf cart in a narrow hallway. You have to go forward and backward and forward and backward and forward and backward multiple times. And you don't want to do that in a peer-to-peer conflict where you have, drone guided munitions, FPV drones, drone adjusted artillery, rocket fire, whatever. I just don't think that the striker or something wheeled like the BTR has as much useful application in peer-to-peer conflict just because of its A, maneuverability, B, lack of armor, and C, greater variables on things that could go wrong. I think as far as impacting its maneuverability and other stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess maybe closing it out, like you mentioned, like the U.S. is going to be adopting a new IFV platform. Like, I guess sort of looking first off your personal experience operating the Bradley, and then also looking at all this footage in Ukraine of them in action. Like, what would you like to see personally on a new infantry combat vehicle, or like the future of infantry combat vehicles? You seem to be pretty content with the Bradley, but like, what do you think they could improve?
One of the things that every member of the Bradley crew, from the commander through the gunner down to the driver, has requested multiple times when they have literally, they would do focus groups. BAE would send focus groups and say, what do you like about the Bradley? What could we do better? What would you like to see? Every single time, the same, or one of the first things was a weapon system for the driver to engage with. A lot of times, especially if the turret is spent, in a spent, or not facing forward, the driver is the first one that sees a threat, right? So that I can go back to situations in Iraq where I was a driver. I would see an insurgent in the road running off the side of the road to engage us with whatever, RPG, detonate an IED, whatever. And if I had the means to engage him, I could have killed him myself easily. But then you're communicating with the gunner like, hey, shit, there's a guy there. You can't engage, or there's nothing for the driver to engage with. You got to worry about the gunner or the BC who didn't see the thing, that are going to be trying to engage. So I think the first thing I would like to see would be something like a coax that the driver would be able to engage with. Looking at the modern tempo of the battlefield in the 21st century, obviously drones are a huge issue. We need way more EW, or electronic warfare, or anti-drone systems. What that looks like, I don't know. Could be like a mini air defense array on it that has a couple of small rockets to blow up drones, something that shoots a net. I don't know what that looks like, but obviously that's cause for concern. I think a little bit more comfortable seating altogether between the crews and the dismounts, those benches, especially in the back. I don't know if there's anybody listening that's ever ridden in the back of a Bradley, but that 7th seat is miserable. I think they could do a little bit to maybe make it a little bit more pleasant experience to ride and operate in. Apart from that, realistically, I would say that's probably it off the top of my head, honestly. That would be the main
maybe
things I would change.
maybe make it a bit easier to maintain, because it sounded like maintenance
Yeah,
was pain.
that would be great. I just don't see how.
Right.
I know I'm not a mechanic or engineer. I don't know how to say, like, hey, make this better so that it's easier. Another thing too, I think I just saw in this video was like, like if it had drones itself, I think that would be awesome. Maybe seeing like a variant where there's a variant of the Bradley called the B Fist, which is like for forward observers, artillery guys. And they've got, instead of an area for dismounts in the back, there's like a like a company commander seat where there's a bunch of computer screens and shit. I don't really know. I don't have much experience with them, but like having a variant like that where you would have maybe 1 or 2 drone operators in the back in lieu of dismounts that could launch, FPV drones, bomber drones, what have you, reconnaissance drones, or any measure of future drones. Maybe they'll have drones that have actual weapons systems on them, like guns or something to engage with. I don't know, but
We'll show
having
you the
something like
machine
that,
gun drone
variant
later.
like that. Oh, nice. Yeah, something like that, or like a flamethrower drone. I think that'd be pretty cool. That'd be intimidating.
Erlend, didn't they
but
make
yeah,
a flamethrower drone? I want to say they did.
I've seen
It's
it.
obviously
They
not
have one.
practical, but
Someone did
I
make
feel like
someone that did make a flamethrower and kill a lot of Russian with it. I know.
on a drone?
that's awesome.
Not sure if it was on a drone, but I know someone did make a flamethrower and storm trenchers with it.
That's fantastic. I love the application of a flamethrower. Like one day somebody said, like, man, I really want to light those sons of bitches on fire, but I'm all the way over here.
A Ukrainian in a garage with a dream.
Yeah. Yes. I love it, dude.
Okay, guys. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Smokey. You're absolutely welcome anytime. We have a good Bradley video you want to show us and talk about, or you want to talk about mechanized warfare in general. I think that about wraps it up, Erlend. Is there anything else before we close out?
Well, no, thank you so much for coming in and trying to inform the public as much as possible about the Bradley and why we should why people should advocate for US sending more of them. I'm not sure how many is available immediately, but I'm sure there's more, and I really hope that there's a bunch of people calling into the reps and do what you do over there in the US. I'm not so familiar
That's what we need, man,
with the US political system, but I know people are calling the representatives. I've understood that much.
Yeah, US listeners, if you are listening right now, do me a favor. Promise me, you call your representatives when next time you call and tell them that we're not doing enough for Ukraine. You tell them that we need to get off our ass and send way more Bradley fighting vehicles. You've seen the utility of them. You've seen how devastating they are. You've seen how hard they are to kill. You've seen all these videos
how well they protect people
too. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The survivability. The Ukrainians need this in their arsenal. They don't need 100 of them. They don't need 50 more to be sent. They need a large amount of these things so that they could change the tempo on the battlefield. They could take the momentum away from Russian advances with more Bradley fighting vehicles, with the F-16s that they're getting to add, again, like I said, to their combined arms doctrine, and all the other Western kit that they're getting. But the nut and bolts where the metal meets the meat, they need to have way more infantry fighting vehicles. And I think, again, I will pound the table and say that the Bradley is the best out of all of them. I know I'm biased, and I know that there are other great ones too, and I hope that they get more of them. I hope they get more CV90s. But bottom line, guys, call your reps, tell them to send more Bradleys. And everybody here on the Tochnyi stream, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to working with you guys again in the future. And any time I could be of service, please let me know. And everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in. This is a first for me. I've never spoken to an audience like this. So thank you. And hopefully you enjoyed it. You found it informative. And if you have any questions or anything, just look for that profile pic that you see of me on Twitter. Feel free to ask. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you.
Just want to point out you did absolutely fine. You did fantastic. It was a great interaction with you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
I'm just, throwing up Philip Bionada here. He brought to attention that there already exists at least 2 different flamethrower drones. So I'm sure the Ukrainians already did this.
Love to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next time I think maybe we could talk about like main battle tank versus IFV platform, because I think that's a discussion to be held as well.
Definitely.
We do have a tanker in our crew, and I'll try and oops, not okay. Sorry.
We're gonna lure him out of his Swedish cave.
Yeah, so we have a former 122 commander in our crew as well, and I'll provoke him by some stuff from you, and then maybe he will come on.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Joseph,
Okay.
I guess you can give your outro.
Thank you, sir. I guess the picture of the week is a drone with a flamethrower on it that you can probably buy on Alibaba. That's the state of the world that Russia has put us all in, folks. Thanks. Yeah, that's it for us this week. It was a great show. We had a lot of guests, a lot of interesting information. Hope everybody learned something. We did our best to get behind the headlines for you and talk about a lot of interesting things. So if you could, please do like the stream. Please do subscribe to Tochnyi. We broadcast every week at the same time. So yeah, please do check us out every week. And we'll also have occasional interviews and things outside of that schedule. So if you subscribe, you won't miss anything. So thanks everyone who participated on the stream. Thanks to the panel. Thanks so much to our guests for participating, and to all the people who contribute on the back end with all sorts of great stuff like graphics and research and other things. Yeah, we'll see everyone next week. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
Heroям слава.